Hey folks, we are getting close to our interviews at the end of the semester. That is the culmination of this class and this project where we've designed job descriptions, we've created interview questions and hiring matrices, I don't know. But that all leads up to being able to give interviews to our business communication students with the goal of selecting one of them to hire who seems to best be able to fulfill all the essential functions, has most of the KSAOs, and seems to be a pretty good fit with the rest of our team. So I hope that everything we've done so far has gotten you feeling comfortable about what you're looking for in a candidate, and that you're looking forward to doing your 3 or 4 interviews the 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. What I want to do in this video is run you through a PowerPoint where I give you some good tips on how to make sure that you conduct your interviews well so that you get the most points possible in feedback from your communications interviewees, and then walk you through the grading of it and tell you how we're going to get numbers to make this objective rather than subjective, and what's going to comprise the final grade. So let me share my camera and my screen. That's the best way to make sure that it's actually working the way I want it to. And we have got here there we go, the title slide. Hopefully you're seeing still what I want you to see. I'm getting a little distracted here. Hopefully what you are seeing is the big blue slide in the main part of your screen and me down in the bottom corner. If you're actually seeing something different than that where it shows the next slide, just don't look at the man behind the screen. Don't look at the next slide coming. The interview project, the overview, and the grading. Things to remember. I want you to remember that it is important for you to communicate with your people. That's one of the most important things, and it's first on the list because the degree to which you communicate both on this project and in real life is largely going to affect the perception they have of you, of the organization, and that'll have a big influence on whether they accept a job offer or not, should you decide to give them one. So what do you want to remember? Communicate an awful lot. And what do I mean by a lot? I mean, perhaps as much as when you get their resume and their cover letter, you shoot them an email saying, hey, I got your resume and your cover letter. I'm looking forward to looking over it. When they have signed up for a date and a time for an interview, you send them an email saying, hey, I see where you've selected the Tuesday at 7 p.m. slot for interviews. I've got it on my calendar and I am looking forward to meeting with you. At some point, maybe all 3 of these get combined into one email, but at some point you say, hey, listen, I'm in Americus. If you happen to be in Americus, why don't we meet face-to-face at the McDonald's or meet you on campus sometime? If you are online, you'll say probably, or especially, I guess if you are online, and especially if your candidate is an online student, you'll say, hey, listen, there's a lot of different technologies out there that we can use to do this video. It's really important to me that we both have a camera that works so that I can see your face and you can see my face and we can pick up on facial expressions and things like that. So do you have a preference whether we do this using Skype or FaceTime, or maybe we can go through Georgia View or Teams or something like that? From my perspective as the teacher, I don't care how you do it as long as you do it. I would really stress that you need to be able to see their face. If there's any way you can do it face-to-face, that's great. But if you need to use some sort of a video technology, at least make sure that they can confirm to you that their camera works. A couple of semesters ago, we had a communication student who didn't want to do the face-to-face, and we kind of let them out of it. On the first one, it's like, okay, whatever, we just need to get this done. And then the second time, it's like, well, the last guy let me do it without using a camera. It's like, we don't want to do that. So try to stress that when we do the videos, we want to be able to have a good microphone, we need to have a good camera, and we need to have the camera on the whole time. So maybe an email, all that summarized is into the statement, by email or by text message or by phone call or something, communicate with them how and work out the details of how we're actually going to conduct this interview. Probably a couple of days before the interview, you send another email and say, listen, we're down to the last couple of days here. Please let me know if anything has changed for you. I've got some flexibility. I'm still planning on Tuesday at 7. The day of the interview, probably, you send an email saying, hey, tonight's the night. We're going to get to meet each other and chat a little bit. I'm looking forward to it. And then probably after the interview is over, a day or two later, send an email saying, hey, I sure did appreciate your time and appreciate your interest in my job. We're still making some decisions, but I will let you know soon, in the next day or two perhaps, what our decisions are. So first thing to remember is to communicate a lot. And you'll see later when we get into the grading, they're going to grade you on how effectively, how professionally you communicated. So the more you communicate, the more likely you're going to get a good grade on that. Second thing to remember is that you need to be early, especially if it comes to video appointments. You know that some of these folks are going to get on kind of in their nervousness. They're going to get on a little bit early, and it's kind of embarrassing if they join the call before you do. You don't want them to wait on you. You want to wait on them. So I'd say at the very least, you log into your call 5 minutes early and maybe even a little bit earlier than that so that you're there when they come in. And part of that being early is thinking about it before it happens. Make sure that you've got a good strategy for the interview. It's going to be important that you be able to transition well between your questions, that you figure out a way where you can jot down notes without really losing track of where you are. And as we've talked about procedural fairness, make sure that your interviews are all pretty much the same. Same questions, same order, same scoring, same everything like that. So communicate, be early, not only in terms of joining the interview, but also in preparing for the interview. Don't leave that up to figuring it out as you go. Third thing to remember is to be professional. If you're doing video interviews, they're not going to see whether you got on pajama pants or shorts or slacks. So that's not critically important. But you want to make sure that the part of you that they're going to see from the camera, you do look nice. This is not a class project. This is a real business interview. So ladies, you're going to want to dress nice, hair nice, earrings, I don't know, pearls or a blazer or a dress or something. Guys, you're going to want to make sure you have a nice collared shirt, perhaps a jacket or blazer, tie maybe, but don't by any stretch of the imagination think you can get by with your sweats, with your tank tops, with your t-shirts. A couple of years ago at this point, I had an on-campus class doing these things, and they were working in teams, actually 2 or 3 of them in the same room interviewing a candidate. And I had one team that showed up in the conference room to do their video interview, and they had t-shirts on and they were kind of grungy and whatnot. And unfortunately, it was right down the hall from the dean's office, and the dean walked by and glanced in and asked me later, it's like, what were they doing? It looked like they were doing an interview or something. I said, yeah, they were doing a project. And she said, oh my gosh, you better count off tremendously for being sloppy in their presentation. That's really, really important that you present a good image for yourself and for the company. So make sure that you're not casual. If you're going to be business casual, make sure that it is really, really nice business casual. Maybe even go above board. And again, guys, maybe a coat and a tie is going to be appropriate for this. We're talking about an hour at a time, either 3 or 4 times. So if you have to put on a coat and tie a couple of times, that's not too much to ask. You want them to look professional, so make sure that you do as well. And then also related to being professional, not just the clothing, but also the grooming. So guys, make sure you've got a nice haircut. Make sure that you've got hair combed, that your glasses are free from smudges. Keep in mind that your glasses will reflect from the light onto the camera, so make sure that they were able to see, depending on how you hold your head, that there's not a glare coming back at them. They can make eye contact with you. With the risk of being sexist, ladies, lipstick, I don't know what these things are that you need to do, but makeup, be professional. That's really, really important. Next thing to remember is that you need to be respectful. They're going to be grading you on how respectful you are. Treat them very, very nicely. Be friendly, be warm, be gracious, be appreciative. Thank them an awful lot for their time, for their effort, so forth, but be respectful. Try to lower their defenses so that they feel comfortable. Next thing, be complete. I'd love to get feedback from them that these things went 30 or 45 minutes. That seems like a real stretch, but I can promise you that if you've got enough questions and enough of the tell me a story type questions, plus your intro stuff, welcome, let me tell you a little bit again, remind you about the job and the company, what questions do you have for me, what are we doing next? Those kinds of things can very easily create a 30 to 45 minute interview. The grading on it is going to be really geared towards at least 30 minutes with prorated grading for less than that. As you ask questions, look for examples of things. Don't take them at their word that they can work in teams well. Have them tell you about it and prove it to you. So look for examples. That extends the interview a little bit. And be sure going into the first interview that you know what you need to make a decision, and then make sure you get that from everybody that you interview. So communicate, be early, be professional, be respectful, be complete, and then be consistent. Again, back to that procedural fairness thing, make sure that you ask the same questions of everybody. You may have to follow up here and there with a question, but it shouldn't be something completely new. If you're asking somebody to give an example of a time they worked in a team and what the outcome was, and they really talk about being in a team, but they don't tell you about the outcome, you need a follow-up question. Say, okay, that sounds great. What was the outcome? And you might not say, what was the outcome to the second candidate, because they might have answered the question in its entirety the first time. Basically, though, same questions for everybody. Really resist the temptation to ask a question that just pops into your head the spur of the moment, especially if this is the second or third or fourth interview, because the first person didn't get that question. It's not entirely fair. And make sure you use the same evaluation standards and process for everybody. That's why I have you create a hiring matrix. And as I've mentioned in the hiring matrix video, you might not ever create or use one in the real world, but for this project, I want you to think about what you're looking for and start making a mental process for how you're going to score it, and then remember those scores. So use that same evaluation tool for everybody. Those are some pretty good things to remember. Lots of other things about making sure that you're considerate of gender identity and all kinds of stuff like that. But I think that's kind of common sense, and we won't go too much into it here. Now, as for the grading component itself, there's four main pieces to this. They're going to give feedback on you, and that's over half of your grade, 54%. You're going to give me feedback on them. That's 20%. Some technical components of this are 20%, and then I have 6% to kind of play with based on guts and hunches and instincts and things like that. How do we get that, especially that 54%? When each of the communication students has finished their second interview, one with you and one with somebody else, I'll send them a link to a Google Form survey, and they'll fill out one of them for you and one of them for the other position that they applied for. And they'll score 1 to 5 on a number of different statements. They'll type in some essay type, short answer, maybe feedback types of questions, and then they'll submit, and that'll populate into an Excel file for me. I can sort those things, I can pull numbers into another spreadsheet, I can create averages and things like that. So that 54% comes from a survey where they won't put their name. You'll end up with either 3 or 4 survey results, and you'll know it's from 3 or 4 different people, but you won't know which one is which. So the anonymous survey, let's look at each one of those things individually. That's 54%. They're going to give me input on you, and that is 5 questions worth 5 points apiece. So 25 out of the 100 points for the assignment is specific information about you. The first question is the degree to which you agree or disagree with this statement. My interviewer was professional in his or her appearance. Strongly disagree, strongly agree, you're not going to get strongly disagree or somewhat disagree, sorry, you're not going to get any points. If they're kind of neutral, you'll get 3 points, but if they somewhat or strongly agree, you'll get almost all or all of the points. Can you control this? Yeah, I'm telling you, if you wear a coat and tie, guys, they're probably going to say you had a very professional appearance, and they'll give you 5s on this. If you wear a t-shirt, somewhat disagree is probably stretching it a little bit, maybe neutral, but you want full points on this. Dress up nice. Make sure that you present yourself well. Second piece for 5 points is my interviewer was professional in how he or she handled the interview. So if you're in control, but you're kind and you're gracious and gentle, again, no points if they disagree to any degree at all. 3 if they're neutral, but 4 or 5 if they somewhat or strongly agree. Can you control this? Yeah, you can get 5 points on every interview just by being very professional in the way that you handle it. Third piece is 5 points. My interviewer was professional in his or her communication processes. Again, from that earlier slide in this presentation, if you communicate a lot and you're very clean in terms of your grammar and spelling and your tone and things like that, should be no reason why any of them should grade you anything less than a 5 strongly agree. The last part of this is my interviewer treated me with respect. 10 points on that. This is double value. It's nice if you communicate well, if you appear nice, but your level of respect that you give them is one of the most important things that you can do in an interview. So it's worth twice the points. It's still a 1 to 5 scale, but if they score you with a 5 strongly agree, you get 10 points. Can you control this? Yeah, you can be nice to everybody. So the first 25 points, you ought to be able to get all 25 of them from everybody. What's next? Input on you for 25, input on the process itself for 29. The first question says, the questions that I was asked were related to the job as I remember from the job description. That's why I really tried to stress through the whole process that when you create your questions, you continue to go back to the job description. Questions about the essential functions, questions about the KSAOs. Even now, as you're looking at this video, you can go back and change your questions because you haven't started your first interview. If you want people to score you by saying, yeah, I think about the job description, just about everything they did on that interview was tied to that job description, so you'd get 10 points. Again, this is a double score. So a 5 strongly agree actually gives you 10 points. There needs to be a real strong connection between your interview questions and the job description itself. I don't know how closely they follow that rule in the real world, but they need to. They should. I'm going to hire you if you can do this job description and the functions and have the skills and so forth. So 10 points out of the 29, the questions related to the job itself. 5 points, I believe that my interviewer took enough time to adequately assess my qualifications. And that's why I stress trying to get beyond about 15 minutes and get towards 30 minutes. I'd have to say as a candidate, even though a lot of interviews are 10 or 15 minutes, I'd have to say as a candidate, you couldn't possibly have gotten to know me in 15 minutes. 30 minutes, 45 minutes, yeah, you took the time to adequately get to know me and figure out if I could do this. So again, the scoring is very similar, nothing for a negative answer, but either 3, 4, or 5 for varying degrees of positive answers. You can score a 5 on this very, very consistently. If your interviews take a little while and you make it obvious that you're really looking at their qualifications and evaluating them. The next piece is whether it was fair or not. I believe that the interview process, as I experienced it, was a fair one. Same kinds of scoring, nothing for a negative. You can make it seem like this is fair. You can make comments like, okay, I've got a standard list of questions I'm asking everybody, so you're not going to be surprised with something nobody else gets. You're not going to get left out by not getting a question they get, whatever. There's a follow-up question to this on the survey they're going to get. If they say something negative, I don't agree that it was fair. I'm going to ask them what happened that makes them think that it wasn't fair. And in all honesty, I rarely ever get any kind of feedback on this because almost every student makes it clear to the interviewee, the candidate, that we're being fair with our processes. In the event that there's a negative answer, we'll get some feedback on why. The next thing we're looking at is whether or not your questions were good ones. So the statement is, I believe that all my questions asked by my interviewer were ethical and legal. And again, positive answers give you positive points, negative answers give you no points. Maybe this ought to be ranked higher than 5 points. Maybe it ought to be double value, but I don't expect that you're going to ask anything illegal or unethical. You're going to do what you're supposed to do. So it's a single value question. 5 score equals 5 points. But if they do say, no, I don't agree at all. I think that they did ask me some questions that were borderline. I'm going to ask them to tell me what questions you asked that they had trouble with. You ought to be able to get 5 points on this from every interview. The last part of this, making up the 29, is asking if this had been a real interview for a real job with a real company, would your interviewer have impressed you enough to accept a job offer? If they say probably or definitely no, no points. If they say probably yes or definitely yes, you either get 2 points or 4 points. So you want to present yourself in a way, present the job in a way, and present the company in a way to where if this were real life and they were really looking for a job, they'd say, man, and to be able to work with that person, yeah, I'd take that job in a heartbeat. Every time they say yes, it's 4 points. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about mathematics and statistics behind the screen, but you want to get as many definitely yeses as you possibly can. Now, that's the candidate input worth 54 points out of 100. Your input is worth 20 points. You're going to give for every one of your interviews 2 positive qualities and 2 negative qualities. Now, that may be very, very slight negatives, but you need to come up with something that they can do to be better. Overall impressions, and I want complete sentences. I don't want you to say, didn't dress well and needs louder volume. I want that in a sentence, kind of setting the stage and telling me what you mean by that. So that's got to be complete sentences. Every interview that you do can get up to 5 points. 1 point each for the 2 positive qualities, 1 point each for the 2 negative qualities, and a 5th point based on how well you communicate that. Complete sentences, clear ideas, so forth. Now, if you're one of the people that only end up with 3 interviews, we're going to pretend like you had 4, and you're going to get all 5 points for that 4th one that you never did. So to some degree, it's to your advantage to only have 3. And yet, if anybody of those 3 scores you with a 3 or a 4, having the 4th interview can bring your average up on the other ones. But you'll get up to 5 points on each of 4 interviews, totaling 20 points. The second part of this, actually your input was 20 points. The technical part of this is that you're going to get up to 20 points for how long your interviews last. Which of the following time ranges best approximates how long you think your interview lasted, and estimate if you're not certain. If you have a 15-minute or less interview, you're not going to get any points at all. And this is based on their perception, and it could be wrong. So it's going to be important to you to help them understand how long you've been in this interview meeting. 15 to 19 minutes is a point. Getting it up to 20 jumps you up to 3 points. 20 to 24 is 3 points. 25 to 29 is 4. And if you can make it go 30 or longer, you're going to get 5 points on this. But please understand, it's productive time only. If you get done with all your questions, I don't want you just chit-chatting. Hey, you're going to plan on watching the ball game tonight. That doesn't count. That makes sense. That's understandable. Productive time only. Just like with the last thing. If you only do 3 interviews, you're going to get the numbers for those 3, but you're going to get an automatic 5 for the 4th one that never happened because you didn't have a chance to earn points on that. So you want to make sure that you've got enough material to try to make this thing last for 30 minutes. You also want to make sure that as you get started, perhaps you make a comment like, hey, okay, I'm ready to get started. Hey, it's 7 o'clock. Or it's 7:02. We had a 7 o'clock appointment. We're starting at 7:02. Let's get into this and see what we can learn about each other. And then at the end of it, as you're wrapping it up, perhaps you say, well, look at that. It's 7:35. We were more than 30 minutes on this interview. That time went by really quickly. Or you say, I've learned what I needed to know, and I think I've gotten to know you, and we've done it all in only about 20 minutes. So that when later I ask them how long it lasted, they can click back on that mentally to that comment that you made, and maybe they'll end up trusting you. I was thinking it was like 20 or 25 minutes, but I remember him saying that this has been 32 minutes, so I'm going to go with that. Anyway, how long does it last makes a difference in the scoring of this project. The last 6 points is my input, and it's only 6 points, but borderline it can make the difference between maybe an A and a B or a B and a C. It's partially my impression of your attitude. It's partially my impression of your contributions. To some extent, it's going to reflect things like, did you answer my dadgum emails? You know, when I was begging you for something, did you give it to me, or did you ignore me for weeks on end? So unfortunately, for some of you, where I've had to really beg and plead and grovel and pull teeth to get you to send me stuff, you haven't made a whole lot of progress on these 6 points, perhaps. What you do from now on can make a difference. And it's partially a feel factor. So all that totals up to 100. It's 54 from the candidate, it's 20 from you about the candidate, it's 20 from technical, that's 94, and then there's 6 points that I can play with. So what else am I doing in this survey? Additional input that doesn't impact the grading at all, but can help you with some honest feedback. So I'm going to ask them, what's one thing you think your interviewer did well during the interview? Please, I say, provide at least one item in the form of a complete sentence with any description that you want to add. And then, not only did they do something well, what's one thing they could do to be a better interviewer? So you're going to get some positive feedback and some negative feedback in addition to the numbers. And then what general feedback would you give to your interviewer as a whole? And I'm not only interested in the feedback on you, I'm interested in the feedback on your teacher and on me. So there are going to be questions like this. What feedback would you give to the business communications teacher that would make the process you went through of developing a resume and a cover letter or preparing for the interview a better one? And then what feedback would you give to the HR staffing teacher that would make this whole thing of looking at jobs, submitting resumes, signing up for interviewers a better process? So I hope I'm going to get some feedback on what I can do better the next time I teach it. All right, so here's the process. We've already mentioned it briefly. When both interviews are done, they're going to get from me an email with a link to a Google Forms survey with instructions that they're going to go through the entire thing on one of their interviews, and they're going to hit submit. And then they're going to click on the link again, get another blank form, and go through the entire process on their second interview. That will create a downloadable Excel file. I'll be able to pull all that together. When I've gotten all of your survey responses, I'm going to average the numbers on something like communication. And let's say that there's 3 responses and they all have a 5. It's going to average out to a 5. If there's 4 responses and it averages out to a 3.75, your grade is going to be 3.75 out of 5 on that item. So the more 5s you get, the more strongly agrees you get, the better your overall grade is. And we're averaging things in a particular item and adding up those individual item scores to get the total. Hope that makes sense in terms of what we got to do to, here we go back to our home screen here. Hopefully this is what you've seen all along. I have, my screen just had the big slide and the next slide up in the corner. But at any rate, goodness, 27 minutes. I can go on forever on these things. Hopefully you got a real clear idea of how you can prepare for your interviews and how you're going to get graded on your interviews. Either start from the front and figure out how you're going to build it correctly, or start from the back and say, what do I got to do to get all these points? Either way that it works, I trust that you're going to have good interviews. Quick note here, for most of you, the first interview is not going to go super well. You may get a great survey score on it, but you're going to be nervous and you're going to stumble a little bit, and that's okay. We expect the first time to be a learning experience, but I want you to grow from that. I want the second one to be better than the first one. By the time you get to the third one or the fourth one, I want you to be able to say there was a big difference between the first one and the fourth one. Even if I get all 5s on all of them, I could see where I made progress. That's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to build you a comfort level with the process of leading up to an interview and a comfort level with actually doing the interview. If we can say that we accomplished both of those things, by golly, you've done great in this class regardless of what your grade is. But you're probably going to have a good grade to show for it. That's it for this video. Hope you're looking forward to the interviews, and I look forward to getting the feedback and sharing some really good things with you. That's it for now. Bye.